Impeachable offenses. That's what Democrat Jerry Nadler, who will be the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, called the election crimes that Michael Cohen says he committed in coordination with and at the direction of Donald Trump. Once again, in federal court today, Michael Cohen and federal prosecutors, and now a federal judge, all described Donald Trump's participation in those crimes as settled fact. And also today, the prosecutors revealed that they have more witnesses to corroborate Michael Cohen's account of the crime that involved the National Enquirer paying $150,000 to Karen McDougal to buy her silence for presidential candidate Donald Trump. So those impeachable offenses became even more impeachable today, even more provable today. Also today, the incoming New York State Attorney General, who will be sworn in next month, tells NBC News that her office is gearing up to target Donald Trump, his family, and anyone in his inner circle suspected of breaking the law. And just a few of those possible investigative avenues include any potential illegalities involving Trump's real estate holdings in New York, the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting with a Russian official, examining government subsidies that the Trump company has received, and whether Donald Trump is in violation of the emoluments clause in the Constitution through his New York businesses, and continuing to investigate the Trump Foundation, which the New York State Attorney General has already been investigating. Donald Trump is going to need more lawyers, a lot more lawyers. Joining our discussion now, Ron Klain, former chief counsel and Senate Judiciary Committee and a former senior advisor to President Obama and Vice President Joe Biden, and Jill Wine-Banks is back with us. And Ron, a very rough day for the president in federal court, and what looks like a rough year coming up with the New York State Attorney General.
That's right, Lawrence. And I think, you mentioned earlier, this decision by the National Enquirer to cooperate could wind up being a very significant decision, not just because of the way in which it buttresses the campaign finance case against Donald Trump, adding a second source of evidence against him, but because of the famous safe at the National Enquirer that supposedly contained all sorts of stories about Trump that they caught and killed, that they bought and didn't publish. And, the National Enquirer, they're famous for their coverage of UFOs. Now it might stand for unindicted felonious officials, because they've got Donald Trump, a lot of information about Donald Trump that will now be moving into the hands of federal prosecutors. I think that adds to his trouble significantly.
Let's listen to Adam Schiff talking about the possibility of actually indicting the president.
I think the Justice Department needs to re-examine that OLC opinion, Office of Legal Counsel opinion, that you cannot indict a sitting president under circumstances in which the failure to do so may mean that person escapes justice. Because if it were the case that it was now or never, that if you wait until after the president leaves office, they can no longer be brought to justice, that ought to create certainly an exception to that OLC rule, if not mean revisiting and revising the rule altogether.
Jill, you've lived with this issue for longer than any of us, the indictability of a president. You've seen various opinions on it over time. Where do you think we are now on it? There seems to be a lot of shifting opinion now toward the validity of indicting a sitting president.
I thought back in Watergate days that the president should be and could be indicted. The evidence was overwhelmingly clear during Watergate. We don't know everything that Mueller knows, but we know enough now to see in plain sight that crimes have been committed by the president. And we cannot have a society where he could escape either because the statute of limitations runs while he's in office, or because he has a speedy trial violation claim that would prevent him from going to trial later on, or because witnesses die in the interim while waiting, and so that there's not enough witnesses to testify. It would be wrong. And so whether we go with the political method, which would be impeachment, in a Congress which has a Senate that will not consider impeachment, although, again, I think that once the evidence is clear, We would have said that about Watergate, except then you had a tape recording that made it so clear that even the Republicans could no longer support the president and told him he had to resign or he would be convicted in the Senate. So we may get to that point because the evidence is mounting. As you just noted, we have multiple sources saying that he interfered with the election. He did a campaign violation to win the election. That's something the American people should be upset about.
And Ron, speaking of tapes, Michael Cohen is known to have taped phone calls and taped discussions with Donald Trump and others. There could be tapes of Donald Trump directing Michael Cohen and coordinating with Michael Cohen to commit these crimes. That could be something that the prosecutors have not yet revealed. There could also be tapes on the National Enquirer end of this. They have been known to tape phone calls, and so the Trump tapes in these particular crimes could be the next stage.
They could be, Lawrence. I mean, look, I think that, you alluded to this earlier, that we've been focused the past couple of days, understandably, about these campaign finance violations that Trump directed. But Robert Mueller's indicated that Michael Cohen assisted him on the core of the investigation. That brings us back to Russia and to the possible relationship between Trump and Russia during the campaign. And really, I think the blockbuster news that came out last week that, Donald Trump was working on this Trump Tower Moscow project all the way through the heart of the presidential campaign. He lied about that. Michael Cohen lied about that in testimony before Congress. Trump himself lied about that publicly. That is still in many ways the main event here. And if there's tapes of Trump and Cohen discussing that, if those tapes we haven't heard about yet around that, that really would be blockbuster information here.
Ron Clay and Jill Wine-Banks, thank you both for joining us. Really appreciate it. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.